Hi, Dr. Stevenson.
Donna, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you doing?
I am on top of the world. At least that's how I feel. I tell you,
Awesome. Well, you should.
big things are happening. Great things.
The man of the hour. That's
Mm,
great. So I look forward to having this conversation with you with all the great stuff that you've been doing and all the amazing accomplishments that has happened for you since what, the beginning of 2023, somewhere around there, or
yeah,
or 2022 when it started.
we started in August 2022. So
Awesome.
well, at 1 year, we're at a 1 year mark right now.
Mm,
So all the things that happened during 1 year, almost
in
to date.
hmm So how did this tell me, how did this whole thing started? Tell us about how this whole process started, how the idea developed, like what triggered a collision with purpose.
What triggered a collision with purpose? So I went to bed one night after having, been interviewed by a blogger podcast, on a podcast, and went to bed, no idea, nothing about this a collision with purpose thing. Went to bed, but I woke up the next morning, and I said to my daughter Kiana, we need to do something about purpose. And she said, okay, what do we call it? And we played around with the idea of something to do with collision or collide. And she came up with this thing about collision. So we said, wow, a collision with purpose.
Mm.
So that's how this idea came about, and really not sure what brought it on. There was nothing going on in my life that was so focused on an intentional approach to purpose. So, you know, take what you get from that. It's not something I can go back and say it was intentional or I was seeking or aiming to do something like this. It happened. It happened.
So you went to bed, right?
Mhm.
And so you met with a podcaster, had an interview, had a conversation, went to bed, all that good stuff, had wonderful dreams, I'm pretty sure. And then this whole idea popped up and your daughter, kind of, you spoke with her, you kind of worked through that. So then at what point were you like, okay, let me write a book or develop this idea of the whole collision with purpose? Like, how did you start that?
So before we even got to the book, it was just an interview. And before we even got to the interview, it was, I was walking in the park because she suggested you need to introduce this thing, a collision with purpose. And the way to introduce it is to talk about it.
Mm,
Talk about it, and not just talk about it, but talk about it in a video format. So I went walking in the park and I used my cell phone and I recorded myself, just talking about this thing about a collision with purpose, welcome who I am, I'm the host, moderator, and what it's all about. And saying things like over in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be having this discussion. And I started to invite my friends to submit a 1 minute, no longer than 1 minute. Some send 2 or 3 minutes,
right.
some type of video speaking on the topic of purpose. So that's how I got started. And then the idea came that why not extend that to an interview, a 30-minute, 45 minutes interview. Some of those
Hmm.
interviews, they were very lengthy. But and then we developed these questions. These questions focused on how we had our collision with our purpose. So, which is another way to say, how do we discover what our purpose is? And after discovering what are we doing with it and what are the implications, how is that making a difference, not just in my life, but in the life of others, right? Because at the end of all of this, having a purpose is all good and well, but what difference is it making, right, in your community, in the life of others? So we got into that, had some interviews, and then it was you that said, you're this book person, right? You said, you need to do a book. You need to write a book. And so that's how that idea about writing and turning this thing into a book or books was birthed. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's so interesting though, because it's almost like you started off actually taking part in someone's podcast. And then in essence, you created your own platform. You created your own podcast just by using yourself to begin with, and then just inviting others to do 1 minute videos. So that's quite creative. Did you even realize that's what you were doing? Were you even intentional about doing that, or was that even a thought in your head that you were just creating your own podcast platform?
Yeah, once the decision was made to move forward and do this and started to invite friends, it was all friends at the beginning, right? And that was intentional. That's all we're building was a podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're building. And so we did that, and then I said before, this thing morphed into other things. And the book thing came through you, of course.
Right. So now that you're doing the book thing, which is exciting, I'm quite sure that's very exciting. What was the process in doing that? In getting the book started, written, and like how was that process for you?
We have two books, right? Going right now. The first book, A Collision with Purpose, Purpose by Design. I started to look at what I was doing more of a case study. And that the individuals I was interviewing, they were participants in the study. So my thing then was to tailor some questions to what I thought was the problem. And the problem was, how did you discover your purpose? And then so the interview was geared around coming up with a solution, just as you would do if you're writing a paper or anything like that. So that's how that came about. So that part was intentional. Because at that point, I said, now that we're in it, how do we, turn this and build it into something, and they're coming up with information we need for the book. So it was very much a case study approach where we had participants and we asked open-ended questions and we got our answers.
Wow. So I hear you mention about a second book.
Well, the second book now was very intentional. Very intentional. The first book is not coming out until December. It's at the editor right now. It's been edited and good things are happening with that. But the second book, I thought, and I know for a fact that we needed something out right now. We needed something. And I said, what is better than to come up with a book that is going to go right to the heart of the problem? Because of so many things happening in our lives, a number of people I've been talking to, and what I've been learning through the interviews I've been doing is that we sort of lost our center. We're rocked, right? We're not who we believe we should be, or we are, right? And many of us, no matter what your financial status, sort of thrown off. We're thrown off center. So this idea was to come up with a guide, something that can refocus you, help you to repurpose yourself, and so that's how this book came about. So that was very intentional. And we call that book Unearthing You, Your Guide to Self-Discovery and Personal Growth. So that's the book that we're focusing on right now. We're pushing. It's actually up on Amazon, came up today.
Congratulations.
The ebook is up today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Mhm.
So how does that feel, Dr. Stevenson? It sounds like you've really had a very busy 1 year. Happy anniversary,
Thank you.
right?
Thank you. Thank
You've
you.
you've you've had a busy 1 year, a lot of accomplishments. So how
Yeah,
does that make you feel?
I feel good, but I know there's so much more that we need to do, right? So, I am not one to linger and hang out with the achievement because we're not done, right?
Hmm.
The energy spent on celebrating is very short-lived, right? So I know because we have so much more work to do, we just got started. And we have a learning institute that we need to focus on, and we need to build out. We have a workshop that will follow the book, or will be utilized in alignment with the book, or the book will be used to conduct the workshop. So there's so much to do, so while we're celebrating, and everything is a collaborative effort, right? And
Right.
I'm spearheading it, but there are other people, other folks involved. So, and the intent is to get more people involved as well. So feel very good about the achievement, but it's just the beginning.
The beginning. Awesome. Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, that's like I said, congratulations. And I look forward to all the wonderful work ahead. I'm quite sure it's going to be very successful.